I was working on a farm back then. Not some charming Midwest postcard farm. I mean the kind that survives on duct tape, unpaid invoices, and stubborn men who don't know how to quit. I never thought I'd get pulled into something like that. Never thought I'd become an accomplice to a kidnapping. And I definitely never thought I'd end up being both a savior and a killer in the same story. The early 90s were chaos. Real chaos. Not the romantic kind people talk about now, not grunge and freedom. I'm talking about the kind of mess where systems collapse quietly and nobody comes to fix them. It wasn't even the gangs or the backroom deals that scared me. That was background noise. What really got under your skin were the predators who realized nobody was watching anymore. Law enforcement? Half of them were chasing payoffs instead of criminals. If you wore a badge, you were either desperate or already corrupt. Truckers got shaken down at checkpoints. Small business owners paid fees to stay safe. And most people? They drank. Professors, mechanics, veterans. It didn't matter. It wasn't just cheap booze. It was the feeling that nothing you did made a difference. That was the air we breathed. I had drifted into a rural stretch of northern Montana after leaving Fresno. Long story. Let's just say I thought small towns meant safety. The town was called Black Hollow. Population maybe 1,000 on a good year. Dirt roads, wide skies, a single blinking traffic light that didn't always blink. And at the end of Cedar Lane, in the only 2-story brick house with a real iron fence, lived the Parkers. Victor Parker, his wife Linda, their 14-year-old daughter, Emily, and a younger son named Caleb. They weren't flashy, but they had money, or at least the appearance of it. New appliances, imported beer, a shiny black German shepherd with papers and a bloodline that stretched back further than most family trees in town. Her name was Raina. I didn't belong to Black Hollow. I was an outsider, hauling potatoes and melons in an old blue Ford grain truck for what used to be a cooperative farm before everything fell apart. Most days I just drove, ate with the guys in the field, slept, tried not to think too much. August 26th, 1993. The heat had started to fade, but the earth still held summer in it. I was lying in the truck's shadow, waiting for lunch delivery. Old habits die hard. Even after the co-op collapsed, some routines stuck. A tractor would bring out stew in metal containers, plastic cups of watered-down juice, bread wrapped in foil. That day, my friend Max rolled up with a cooler. Max was the kind of guy who always had a plan and never had a future. Broad shoulders, restless eyes, smile that never reached them. His older brother, Hank, showed up later on a dirt bike. Hank had 6 fingers on one hand and the mind of a 12-year-old trapped in a body built for demolition work. He couldn't read more than road signs, but he could snap a fence post in half without trying. We'd done small things before. Petty theft, skimming fuel, selling grain on the side. Nothing that felt irreversible. Max handed me a mason jar filled with homemade brew. "Tell me something, Ryan," he said, squinting at me. "You ever get tired of busting your back in a country that wouldn't notice if you dropped dead in this field?" I shrugged. "This is me living better. You forget where I came from." He smirked. "You've been to the Parker's house, right? Victor's birthday last week. You saw how they live." I had. Imported stereo system, brand new Sony camcorder, cases of German beer. Raina lying at the foot of the staircase like royalty. "Yeah," I said. "So?" "So imagine that's just the surface." I didn't answer. Max leaned closer. "You think Victor makes that kind of money selling spare tractor parts? He's skimming equipment." Moving machinery to buyers in Billings and Spokane. Cash under the table. He's sitting on stacks. I lit a cigarette. The tobacco was my own crop, dried behind the shed. Strong, bitter, honest. "We're not stealing grain again," Max continued. "That was stupid. This is different, bigger, cleaner." I looked at him sideways. "What are you talking about?" He lowered his voice. "We take the dog." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. Raina's worth a fortune with those papers. I've got a contact in Billings. Sells rare breeds to collectors back east. Cash, no questions." Hank pulled a folded letter from his pocket and shoved it into Max's hand. "Read it," Hank muttered. "They said it's important." Max skimmed it. His jaw tightened. It was a notice from the county sheriff's office. They wanted Hank to come in regarding inventory discrepancies from the old co-op warehouses. Max crushed the paper in his fist. "That's Victor," he hissed. "He tipped them off. He's covering his own tracks." The air shifted after that. "Tonight," Max said, "we take the dog." I should have walked away then. Instead, that evening, I found myself at the Parker house under a friendly pretense. I told Victor my truck's transmission was acting up and I might need to borrow equipment over the weekend. He listened calmly. Raina lay on the porch, watching me with steady, intelligent eyes. Victor mentioned they were planning a short trip to Seattle, asked if I could check in on the place while they were gone, feed the dog, keep an eye out. He handed me a spare key. Trust is a heavy thing. When I left, the sky was turning purple over the fields. I went straight to Max's place. He and Hank were already drinking. "You're not backing out," Max said before I even sat down. "I told you," I said. "He gave me the key." "Perfect," Max replied. By 10, we were on the move. The old grain truck rumbled toward the tree line beyond town. They had bought a large rolling suitcase from a thrift store, big enough, they said, to transport a calm dog discreetly. We didn't go straight to the Parkers' property. Instead, Max directed me into the forest, toward an abandoned livestock processing site near Dry Creek. Locals avoided it. Old-timers used to say strange things about the place. I never paid attention. The buildings were skeletal shapes against the moonlight. Empty barns, a main structure with a sagging roof. The smell of old rot still lingered in the wood. I cut the engine. The night pressed in. Hank dragged the suitcase from the truck bed. And then it moved. A muffled scream came from inside, not barking, not scratching, a human scream. My blood ran cold. "Hank," I said slowly, "what did you do?" Max didn't look surprised. They unzipped the case just enough. Emily Parker stared up at us, wrists bound, face streaked with tears. "Let me out! Please!" The world tilted. "You said the dog," I whispered. Max met my eyes. "The girl's worth more." "The girl's worth more." Max said it the way you'd say gas costs more than diesel, like it was just a fact of life. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking, that any second he'd crack that crooked smile and say, "Relax, man, we're messing with you." He didn't. Emily's face was pale in the moonlight. Her dark hair was tangled across her cheeks, and her eyes were wide, not just scared, but confused, betrayed. She recognized me. "Mr. Cole," she choked out. "Please." That nearly broke me right there. I rounded on Max. "We agreed on the dog. What the hell is this?" Max didn't even flinch. He sat down on a broken wooden crate like we were about to discuss crop prices. "Think, Ryan," he said calmly. "Victor will sell everything he owns to get her back. He won't go to the cops if we do it right. And if he does, we disappear." Hank stood beside the suitcase, breathing hard. His massive hand rested on the handle. There was something wrong in his expression. Not guilt, not excitement, just confusion, like he wasn't fully tracking how we'd gotten here. "You put her in a suitcase," I said quietly. "She fit," Max replied. The way he said it, like that made it better, sent something hot and ugly crawling up my spine. "We get ransom," Max continued. 70% for us, 30 for you. You drove. Fair's fair." "I'm not doing this." Max's eyes shifted then, just a little, a subtle tightening. "Yeah," he said softly. "You are." He stood and stepped closer. "Truck's yours. You were at the house tonight. You've got the key. If this goes bad, guess who they'll look at first?" The answer hung in the air between us. "And if you try to run," he added, almost conversationally, "Hank and I can bury 2 bodies instead of 1. Hank didn't say anything, but his fingers flexed. Inside the suitcase, Emily started crying again. Not screaming now, just small, broken sounds. I looked at her. 14 years old. And I had walked myself straight into this. We carried the suitcase inside the old processing building. The wooden floor sagged under Hank's weight. The place still smelled faintly of iron and rot, even after years of abandonment. Max found an old stool and sat down like he owned the place. "Tomorrow," he said, "we call Victor. We tell him where to drop the money. No cops. He pays, she goes home." "And then?" I asked. Max tilted his head. "What do you mean, and then? You think she won't recognize us?" For the first time, silence stretched. Hank shifted uncomfortably. Max didn't answer right away. That was worse than if he had. Finally, he said, "We'll figure that out." That wasn't an answer. Later that night, Hank dozed off downstairs on a moldy couch. Max stepped outside for air. I went upstairs. The suitcase was wedged into a small side room that might have once been an office. Moonlight spilled through broken boards, striping the walls. Emily was shaking. I crouched beside her and whispered, "I'm going to loosen this. Don't scream." She nodded frantically. My fingers worked at the knots. Her wrists were red and raw. When I pulled the zipper back enough for her to sit up, she sucked in air like she'd been underwater. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear to you." "Are they going to kill me?" she asked. That question hit harder than anything else. I won't let that happen. Even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. From downstairs, Hank's voice boomed. "Ryan, Max said don't mess with her." I quickly zipped the suitcase halfway and stepped back. "Coming!" Hank stared at me when I came down. There was suspicion there now. Max had talked to him. "Max says you don't get alone time," Hank muttered. "Not anymore." That's when I knew. Max didn't trust me. And if he didn't trust me, I was already halfway dead. We were arguing when it happened. A sound tore through the night. Not thunder, not wind. It was like 1,000 voices screaming through rusted metal. A grinding, bone-deep vibration that hit my skull and burrowed inward. Hank dropped to his knees instantly. Blood streamed from his nose. I clutched my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside, it was inside my head. Max staggered in from the yard, eyes wild. "What the hell was that?" Then it stopped. Just like that. The forest went silent. Too silent. Even the insects had shut up. We stared at each other. Hank wiped blood from his face and whispered, "It's the woods." Max grabbed the pistol from the drawer he'd hidden it in earlier. "Shut up." But I could see it. For the first time since I'd known him, Max looked scared. An idea formed in my mind, desperate, stupid, but something. "I saw someone," I said suddenly. Max turned. "What?" "Out by the old cattle pens, when the noise hit. A man. Looked like a hunter." It was a lie, completely, but I needed them out of the house. Max hesitated, then nodded. "Let's check it." He shoved the gun into his waistband and headed outside. Hank followed. I lingered half a second longer, then ran upstairs. I fully unzipped the suitcase. Emily scrambled out, weak but determined. "Can you run?" I asked. She nodded. "Stay behind me." We were halfway down the stairs when a shape moved outside the doorway, something tall, too tall. It wasn't standing under the moonlight. It was blocking it. Max saw it first. He froze mid-step. For a moment, none of us breathed. And then we all ran. Max bolted into the tree line. Hank stumbled toward the barn. I grabbed Emily and dragged her toward the truck. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know what had been standing there. But I felt it watching. The truck keys were still in the ignition. That's the only reason we lived long enough to drive. I shoved Emily into the passenger seat and jumped behind the wheel. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys trying to turn them. "Go! Go!" she cried. I didn't need telling twice. The engine roared to life, headlights snapping on and slicing through the trees. For half a second, the beams caught something between the trunks. Something tall. Wrong. Then it was gone. I slammed the truck into gear and tore down the dirt path, branches whipping against the sides. Emily curled into herself, arms over her head, crying silently now. Behind us, movement. Not running, gliding. I caught glimpses in the side mirror, a pale shape keeping pace between the trees, impossibly smooth, impossibly fast.
"Don't look at it," I muttered, though I couldn't stop looking myself.
The road curved sharply, and I jerked the wheel just in time to avoid a fallen log. The truck fishtailed, corrected, and then someone stepped into the road. I hit the brakes too late. The truck swerved, clipped a pine, and slammed sideways into the trunk with a bone-rattling crunch. Air exploded from my lungs. Emily screamed. When everything stopped moving, there was silence. Then pounding on the hood. I looked up. Max. He was alive, wild-eyed, bleeding from a cut over his brow. He yanked open my door and dragged me out by my shirt. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "You think you can just take her?" "She's a kid, Max," I shouted back. "This is over." He shoved me hard against the truck. The pistol was in his hand now. "You don't get to decide that." Emily scrambled out the other side and ran into the trees. Max saw her go. He raised the gun, not at me, at her. Without thinking, I lunged. The shot went off. The bullet tore past my ear. We hit the ground together, wrestling for the gun. Max was stronger than he looked, panic giving him leverage. His breath reeked of cheap liquor and fear. "You ruined it," he snarled. "We could have had everything." Another shot cracked into the air, and then Max stopped moving. I rolled away from him, disoriented. He was staring upward, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. A hole had appeared in the center of his forehead. Slowly, his body tipped sideways. Hank stood 10 feet away, holding the pistol in both shaking hands. "I didn't mean," Hank whispered. The forest moved behind him. Not wind, not animals. It moved like something large, shifting its weight. Hank turned and screamed. The thing came out of the trees in one impossible motion, too tall for a man, too thin. Its limbs bent in angles that made my eyes hurt. Parts of it looked like bark. Parts like rotting flesh. Its head, God, its head shifted shape as I watched, stretching, compressing, bones sliding under skin. Hank fired wildly. The bullets punched into it. Did nothing. The creature reached him in 2 strides. Its arm, if that's what it was, passed through Hank's chest like it was pushing through smoke. He lifted off the ground, gasping. Then the sound came again, that screaming metal shriek that drilled into my skull. Blood poured from Hank's nose and ears, and then his spine came out of his body in one wet, snapping motion. The creature held it up almost curiously. Hank dropped. Empty. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing turned toward me. Its face shifted again, and for one horrible second, it was Hank's face. Then Max's. Then something with antlers. Then something faceless entirely. It tilted its head, studying. I forced my legs to work. I ran. Branches tore at my clothes as I pushed deeper into the woods. "Emily!" I shouted. No answer. The forest felt wrong now, thicker, closer, like the trees had stepped inward while I wasn't looking. I stumbled into a clearing and stopped. Emily sat on a fallen log, staring ahead blankly. Across from her stood the thing. Up close, it was worse. Its body looked woven into the forest floor, roots threaded through muscle, bark fused with bone. Its torso split slightly down the middle as it breathed, revealing something dark and wet inside. It didn't look at Emily. It looked at me. "You lie," it said. The voice wasn't sound. It was pressure in my skull. "You lie to yourself." I couldn't form words at first. I didn't want this," I managed. It stepped closer. The ground seemed to move with it. "You wanted survival, not innocence." It wasn't wrong. "You brought corruption here," it continued. "You broke balance." Emily blinked slowly, like she couldn't see it at all. "What are you?" I whispered. It leaned down slightly. "I am what remains when men forget how to ask." That made no sense, and somehow perfect sense. It turned slightly, gesturing with a limb that seemed half root, half bone. "Long ago they brought offering. Blood for protection, flesh for boundary. I held the dark things beyond. I kept teeth from the doors." My throat was dry. "You want cattle," I said. Its head tilted. "You remember?" I didn't remember, not really. But old ranchers used to mutter about the abandoned pens, about keeping the woods fed. I'd thought it was superstition. "I can bring you cattle," I said quickly, "as many as you want." It stepped closer until its presence pressed against my skin like static. "I take pledge," it said. Before I could react, something sharp pierced my injured palm. Not through skin, through bone. Something slid inside my hand. I screamed. The pain wasn't physical alone. It was like roots burrowing into my nerves. "When balance returns," it said, "sight returns." My vision flickered, dimmed. The trees blurred. "No," I breathed. "You leave with the young one. You return with offering." The darkness deepened, shapes dissolved into shadow, and then nothing. When I came to, I was on the edge of town. Emily was walking beside me, holding my sleeve. I couldn't see her. "Mr. Cole?" she asked softly. I tried to look at her. There was only black. "I'm here," I said.
but I was already blind. By the time we reached Black Hollow, I could barely tell where the road ended and the gravel shoulder began. The world had dissolved into shadow and pressure. Sound replacing sight, instinct replacing direction. Emily was guiding me. 14 years old, barefoot, traumatized, and guiding me.
"We're almost there," she kept saying in a small, steady voice, like she was the adult and I was the one who needed reassurance. I could hear engines before we reached the Parker house. Doors slamming, voices, sheriff's radios crackling. Word had spread fast. When we stepped onto the Parkers' porch, everything stopped. You can feel silence when it happens. It pulls the air tight. "Dad?" Emily called. Linda Parker screamed first, then Victor. Boots pounded across wood. Hands grabbed Emily. Someone shoved me hard against the siding. My head struck brick. "What did you do?" Victor roared. I tried to explain, but when you're blind and bleeding and shaking, your words don't line up right. "She's alive," I said. She's okay." "Where is he?" someone shouted. "Where's Max? Where's Hank?" "I don't know," I said, honestly. That part was true. Deputy Harris cuffed me before I even finished speaking. "Ryan Cole," he said flatly. "You're under arrest for kidnapping and extortion." Extortion. That meant Max had already made the call, or tried to. I opened my mouth to protest, but Emily was crying again, and Victor was swearing he'd kill me if the law didn't. No one asked about the forest. No one asked about what had happened out there, because nobody wants an answer like that. They found Max's body the next morning, half a mile from the crash site. Single gunshot wound to the head. They found Hank 2 days later, or parts of him. The official story was animals. That's what they told the town. Black Hollow accepted it because it was easier. They never found what tore him open. My trial took less than 3 months. Blindness didn't help me the way you'd think it might. It didn't make me look innocent. It made me look like a monster pretending to be broken. The prosecution painted it clean and simple. I had access to the Parker house. I had financial trouble.
I was seen with Max and Hank that night. The ransom call was traced to a payphone near the old processing site. Emily testified. She said I had loosened the suitcase. She said I told her I'd protect her. But she also said I was there. That was enough. When my lawyer asked her about the forest, about seeing anything unusual, she hesitated. Then she said, "No." Her voice was flat when she said it. Maybe she truly hadn't seen it, or maybe her mind refused to hold it. I don't blame her. 17 years. That's what the judge gave me. Kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted extortion. Blind inmates don't get put in maximum security. Too much liability. I ended up in a low-security correctional facility outside Missoula. I learned to count steps, learned which guards were cruel and which just tired, learned how to hear a man's intentions in the way he breathes before he speaks. And at night, sometimes, I felt it, a faint pulling in my right palm, like something under the skin tightening when I thought about the forest. 17 years is long enough for the world to forget you, long enough for a town to move on, long enough for guilt to change shape. When I got out, Black Hollow felt smaller, quieter. The Parkers were gone, moved to Washington State years ago. Victor never returned to the farm. The old processing site had been partially burned in a wildfire back in 2004. They said lightning struck, cleared half the structures. No one rebuilt. No one went near it anymore. That part hadn't changed. I rented a room above Miller's Hardware. The owner remembered me vaguely but didn't ask questions. At night, I'd sit by the open window and listen to the wind coming down from the timberline. And sometimes, when it shifted just right, I heard it. Not the scream, not fully, just a hint, like metal dragged slowly across stone. And the thing in my palm would tighten, waiting. It hadn't taken my sight permanently. It had taken it conditionally.
When balance returns, it had said. That wasn't a curse. That was a contract. I started asking questions quietly. Old-timers remembered fragments. They used to drive cattle out there, one man told me after a few beers. Granddad said it kept wolves off the ranches. Another said, there was something about the old slaughter pen agreement. Folks didn't talk about it after the war. Agreement, not superstition. Agreement. I did the math. If it had protected the town once, and if it was hungry now, then I hadn't just stumbled into it. Max and Hank hadn't just died. The balance had already been broken long before we showed up with a suitcase and a girl. We were just the latest mistake. I started saving money. Disability checks, odd repair jobs I could manage by touch. Quiet loans from people who still believed I wasn't a monster. Because I needed cattle. Not stolen, bought. Healthy, alive. I couldn't drive them myself, but money can convince a man to transport livestock into the woods without too many questions. I wouldn't tell him why. I wouldn't mention the scream. I wouldn't mention the contract buried in my hand. But I would pay well, because I want my sight back. Not just to see again, but to know. To know whether the thing is still there. To know whether Emily ever truly saw it. To know whether I was punished for kidnapping or for trespassing somewhere older than law. I found the hauler in a bar off Route 93. His name was Derek Shaw, mid-30s, former rodeo rider, now hauling livestock across western Montana and northern Idaho. The kind of man who measured trust in eye contact and cash laid flat on the table. I couldn't offer the first anymore, so I offered the second. I need 6 head, I told him. Healthy, quiet, delivered to a clearing past Dry Creek. He paused mid-sip. That land's not active pasture, he said. Nobody runs cattle out there. I know. He studied me for a long moment. I could hear it in the silence, the calculation. Why? Private agreement. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't complete. Money makes men curious. Enough money makes them silent. He agreed. We scheduled the run for late October. The air would be colder, fewer hikers, less chance of someone wandering where they shouldn't. The closer the date came, the more the thing in my palm stirred. Sometimes it burned. Sometimes it felt like something shifting just beneath the bone, not painful, but aware. Like it knew I was keeping my word. I hadn't told anyone else what I was doing. Not about the forest, not about the contract. Certainly not about the hope. Because hope, in my experience, tends to turn feral when spoken out loud. We loaded at dawn. 6 black Angus steers. Calm enough. Heavy. Strong. Derek drove the trailer. I rode shotgun. You sure about this? He asked as we left the highway and took the old logging road toward Dry Creek. Yes. You sound like a man walking into church, he muttered. Feels close enough. The road grew rougher. Tires thudded over roots and washed out ruts. Branches scraped the sides of the trailer with a hollow, dragging sound. The forest was quieter than it should have been. Even Derek noticed. No birds, he said under his breath. We reached the clearing just before noon. I knew it without seeing it. The air changed, colder, heavier, like stepping into a room where someone had been waiting. Where you want him? Derek asked. open the gate." He hesitated, then climbed out. Metal creaked as the trailer latch released. The cattle shifted nervously inside. The first steer stepped down onto the forest floor, hooves pressing into damp earth. Then the second, then the third. By the fourth, they were restless. By the sixth, they were backing up, lowing in distress. "Something spooking them," Derek said sharply. I felt it too.
A pressure building behind my eyes, or where my eyes used to mean something. "Get back in the truck," I said quietly. "What?" "Get back in the truck, now!" The wind stopped, completely. No leaves, no insects, nothing. And then the sound came, not as violent as before, lower, closer, like something exhaling through rusted lungs. The cattle panicked. One tried to bolt past Derek, nearly knocking him down. He swore and scrambled backward toward the cab. The ground shifted, not trembled, shifted, like weight transferring beneath soil. Derek slammed the truck door and gunned the engine. "Ryan!" he shouted through the open window. "Get in!" I didn't move, because it was here. I felt it standing in front of me, not touching, just existing. "You return," it said inside my skull. "Yes," I whispered. The forest inhaled. One of the steers screamed, a horrible, choking bellow, and then cut off mid-sound. Another collapsed. I could hear bones snap, flesh tear. Derek shouted something, I think my name, but his voice sounded distant. "You honor contract," it said. Pain lanced through my palm, sharp, blinding, and then light. Faint at first, like dawn through fog. Shapes, blurred edges of trees, movement. I gasped. Color seeped back slowly, gray first, then brown, then green, bleeding into existence. The clearing formed around me piece by piece, and in the center, it. Taller than I remembered, wider. Its torso split open slightly as it fed, roots piercing through cattle flesh, drawing something deeper than blood. Its head turned toward me. Now I could see it fully. It was not one shape. It was many. Antlers woven from branches, human jaw beneath bark, hollow eye sockets filled with slow-moving sap. It studied me. "You see," it said. "I see." Behind it, 3 cattle already lay hollowed. 2 more twitched weakly. Derek's truck roared away down the path. He didn't wait. Smart man. "Balance returns," it murmured. I swallowed. "Is it done?" The creature tilted its head. "For now." The roots withdrew from the final steer. Its body collapsed like an emptied sack. Silence returned. Slowly, birds resumed somewhere far off. The creature stepped closer. Up close in full sight, it was worse, and somehow more precise. It wasn't chaos. It was structure, ancient and deliberate. "You broke boundary," it said, "but you repaired debt." My palm burned one last time. The skin there had changed. A thin, dark line now ran across it, like a scar, shaped almost like a branch. "What happens now?" I asked. It looked past me, toward the direction of town. "Men forget again." A pause. "They always forget." Its form began to recede, bark merging with tree trunks, limbs dissolving into root and shadow. Before it vanished completely, it spoke once more. "The young one still carries silence." Emily. What does that mean? But it was already gone. Only the clearing remained. And the bodies. The smell hit me first. Hot iron, wet earth,
split stomachs. 6 steers reduced to husks in less than 5 minutes. Their bodies weren't torn apart the way predators leave them. There was no chaos to it, no frenzy. It was extracted, like something had reached in and removed only what it needed. Efficient, deliberate. My vision was steady now. Not perfect. The world felt slightly sharper than it used to, like the contrast had been turned up. But I could see every detail, every drop of blood soaking into the soil and beneath the soil. The ground pulsed once, subtle, then stilled. The forest was breathing again. Birds resumed. Wind threaded through branches. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped, as if nothing had happened.
I stood there alone with the bodies and tried to decide whether I felt relieved or implicated. Because here was the truth no court ever heard. The thing hadn't punished me. It had corrected me. That distinction matters. Derek didn't answer my calls that night, or the next. On the 3rd day, I drove to his place outside Hamilton. His wife answered the door. "He hasn't been right," she said, before I even asked. "Since that trip." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "He won't talk about it. Won't haul livestock anymore. Says the woods were moving." She tried to laugh when she said it. It didn't land. "He wakes up at night saying he hears something dragging across metal. The sound. The scream that isn't a scream. He's inside," she added quietly. "If you want to talk." I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Not blind, just distant. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. "You should have told me," he said. "I couldn't." "You knew." "Yes." Silence filled the room. "You see it?" he asked finally. "Yes." He swallowed. "It looked at me once." I didn't respond because I didn't know if that was true, or if Derek just needed it to be. "I'm done hauling," he muttered. "I won't go back there." "You won't have to." I meant it. At least, I hoped I did. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet. Black Hollow felt lighter. The usual late-season cattle losses stopped. No more unexplained disappearances. No strange tracks found near fences. Ranchers even joked that maybe the wolves had finally moved on. They hadn't. The wolves were never the problem. I started sleeping through the night again. The scar in my palm faded from angry red to dark brown. Sometimes it tingled, but not urgently, not hungry. And then I saw her, Emily. It was outside the post office. She was older now, 28 maybe. Hair shorter, shoulders straighter, but I recognized her immediately. There's something about shared trauma that brands memory permanently. She saw me too. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me. "You can see," she said quietly. "Yes." She nodded. "I heard. Small towns don't let stories die completely." "I never thanked you," she added. I didn't know how to answer that. "You loosened the suitcase," she said. "You tried." "I'm sorry," I replied. She studied me carefully. "You went back." It wasn't a question. "Yes." A long pause. "You shouldn't have." The words caught me off guard. I had to. She looked past me, toward the distant tree line visible beyond town. "You think feeding it makes it safe?" The way she said it made my skin prickle. You remember, I said slowly. She didn't answer right away. When I was sitting on that log, she began, voice calm. I couldn't see it, not fully, but I could feel something standing between me and the dark. She met my eyes. It wasn't protecting us, Ryan. My name sounded different coming from her now. It was protecting the boundary. That word again, boundary. What happens when it decides the boundary moved? She asked. A cold weight settled in my chest. You said balance was restored, she continued. For now. She knew. She had heard it too. How often is for now? She asked. I didn't have an answer. That night, the wind shifted again. I heard it clearly from my open window. Not distant, closer than before. The dragging metal whisper. The thing in my palm burned for the first time since the offering. Not hunger. Warning. I stepped outside. The forest line looked the same as it always had. But something was wrong. The darkness between the trees felt deeper, thicker, like an open mouth. And then I saw it. Not the creature, not fully, but movement along the edge of town. A deer stepped out from the tree line, except its legs bent backward. Its eyes were wrong. Black sap leaked from its nostrils. It stared directly at me. Then it opened its mouth, and the scream poured out, not from the woods, from it, from inside town limits. The boundary had shifted, and whatever agreement had existed before was no longer contained. The deer stood at the edge of Maple Street like it belonged there, street light humming above it, porch lights glowing behind it, town on one side, forest on the other, and it was facing me. Its jaw hung open too wide, black sap threading from its mouth to the pavement. The scream that came out wasn't animal. It wasn't even the metallic shriek from the forest. It was layered, like multiple voices trying to use one throat. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Lights flicked on in two houses. The deer's head twitched toward the sound, too sharp, too mechanical. And then it stepped forward, across the ditch, onto asphalt, inside town limits. My palm ignited. Not pain, recognition. The boundary had moved, or something had pushed it. Stop, I whispered. Not to the deer, but to the woods behind it. The creature wasn't visible, but I felt it. Watching, calculating. The deer took another step. Its legs buckled backward unnaturally, then corrected. It wasn't walking. It was adjusting to a shape it wasn't meant to hold. Mrs. Hanley's front door creaked open down the street. "Who's out there?" she called. The deer turned toward her voice and charged. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan. I sprinted straight at it. It saw me at the last second. Its head snapped back toward me, and for one flicker of a heartbeat, its face wasn't a deer's. It was Max's. Then Hank's. Then antlers and bark and hollow sockets. It slammed into me mid-stride. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. We hit the pavement hard. Its weight was wrong, too dense for its size. It thrashed, hooves striking sparks from asphalt. Up close, I saw roots under its hide. Threaded through muscle, being pulled, controlled, from somewhere deeper. I jammed my injured palm against its skull on instinct. The scar flared white-hot, and the world dropped silent. The deer froze. Its body convulsed once, then collapsed. Not dead. Empty.
like the cattle had been. Across the street, Mrs. Hanley screamed. Lights came on up and down Maple. Doors opened. People stepped out. And from the forest line, finally, it emerged. Not fully, not into town, but close enough that I could see its outline between the trees. Taller than before, wider, its form no longer blending smoothly with bark and shadow. It looked strained, like something stretching past its design. "You moved," it said inside my skull. "No," I said aloud, standing slowly. "You did." Wind whipped down the street. Trash cans rattled. "You fed," it said. "Yes." "Balance restored." "For the forest," I snapped. "Not for us." Silence. Its head shifted slightly. "You expand," it said, "because you let it." I took a step toward the tree line. It did not retreat. The people behind me were whispering now, calling 911, asking what happened. They couldn't see it clearly, not the way I could. "You said you kept teeth from the doors," I said. "But you're the one testing the door now." The pressure in my palm intensified. "You forget agreement," it said. "No," I replied. "I remember it better than anyone." Another pause. Longer. Then, "Men always forget." Then remind us, without crossing the line. The creature shifted again, unstable for a moment. Shapes slipping too fast between forms. Antlers splintered into branches. Branches recoiled into bone. It was losing cohesion. The offering hadn't strengthened it. It had anchored it. And when it reached beyond that anchor, it destabilized. "You require boundary," I said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Its presence flickered. For the first time, I felt something new from it. Not hunger, not correction. Uncertainty. "If you push further," I said, "you won't be balance anymore." The wind stilled. "You threaten?" "I warn." Behind me, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights would be here in minutes. Human law, human noise, human interference. The creature withdrew half a step into shadow. "The young one carries silence," it repeated. "I know. She remembers boundary. So do I." A final stillness. Then the forest inhaled. And it receded. Not vanished, not gone, but contained again. The darkness between the trees returned to something almost natural. Almost. The police wrote it up as a rabid deer. Strange behavior, aggressive movement, collapsed from unknown cause. They didn't know what to make of the emptiness inside its body when animal control examined it. They didn't ask me much. I was just the ex-con who happened to be in the wrong place again. Emily came by the next morning. She stood beside the tree line with me in daylight. "It tried to step through," she said. "Yes. It won't stop." "No." We stood in silence for a while. "It needs the boundary," she said eventually. "Yes. And the town needs someone who remembers it exists." I looked at her. "You're not leaving again," she said. It wasn't a request. I glanced at the scar in my palm, then at the forest. "No," I said. "I'm not." Here's what I know now. The creature isn't evil, and it isn't good. It is function. It is older than Black Hollow, older than fences, older than the word law. It keeps something worse from crossing fully into our world. But it requires maintenance, memory, respect, and sometimes blood. 17 years ago, I thought I was the villain of this story. Maybe I was, but I wasn't the only one trespassing. Now I see, literally.
And I understand what the old ranchers meant when they said some places aren't owned. They're negotiated with. The forest watches, the boundary holds, and I stay. Because someone has to remember what lives just beyond the tree line, and what happens when it forgets where it ends.